Hello everyone, welcome to Writing Quest. My name is Brendan, and in today's episode, we are going to go through the three different groups that we are going to set up for future stories based on our three main characters, Ro, Gaian, and Agorath. Huzzah! Alright everyone, so if you've been following along with the story, you know that we have one main character and then two main characters, supporting characters. Gaian and Agorath are brothers. One of them is more of a knight, one of them is more of a mage, and they were the original main characters of the story. As we wrote, we discovered that we had the wrong main character and we found a new one, and her name is Ro. So I want to break down what my vision is for what these become later in the story, what these main characters become, and why that's driving the narrative of how things are going to go. So in my original story, I have three groups. There's multiple different groups, but I have three really big main groups. I call the Knights of Whiteforge. They are a group of like a brotherhood of knights they wear white armor, and they are like big, like think paladins from Warcraft 3. Like they're these big, bulky, bearded Viking knight guys that are warriors. They are, they swear their life to the brotherhood. They don't, ever marry or have kids. They swear their life, and then they are like these powerful knights, and they are like total force of good. They are like strictly no magic. They dislike magic, and they're not a big fan of people who use magic, but they have learned to come alongside people and all that stuff. They primarily are humans, and they are all humans, and they live in a castle called Whiteforge, which is why they're the Knights of Whiteforge, and that castle is located right next to Brightvale, which is going to become one day the main human city. Think like a Minas Tirith type thing. That's the main city. So they work in conjunction. So they're actually a separate entity, but they work in conjunction with Brightvale. They've made an agreement that we are they work together. The next group is the Magi. Now, they were the original antagonist of my first group of books I was working on, and they still are. How they come about is much different, obviously, because we've expanded. So like I have a trilogy, 1, 2, 3, which is my original goal of just writing 3 books. Well, now I've got 2 trilogies ahead of it, and I've got 1 trilogy after. Shows you how much this L is expanded. So the Magi, to me, were a group of magicians, essentially, who could wield kind of unlimited power. Now, originally I had them very OP. I didn't have much limits on their magic, which is one of Brandon Sanderson's laws of magic, is having kind of the limits or whatever. You see that with Orson Scott Card too, I think, talks about that. But the Magi were the antagonists. They were used to be on the side of good, and then they were corrupted by their evil, or their magic became evil, became the enemies, and they were driven out, and then they had come back and they had become the antagonists. So the antithesis of that is what I've called the Hunters. And the Hunters are a group of, they're all races, or main races of orcs, elves, humans, and dwarves, paired with a wolf. So you'd have like an elf, they're wolf riders. So you'd have an elf paired with a wolf, and the wolves have wings, some of them do. So very much kind of a dragon rider type idea. However, the magic that they can produce is elemental. So we have one character who is an elf who has a wolf partner, and they can control fire and water and earth and all that. Each one has an individual element they can control, and then they place them, they go together in what I call clans. So it's 4 hunters to a clan. So a hunter is a pair of elf wolf, human wolf, orc wolf, and dwarf wolf pairs, and then they make 4 of those. So there's 8 total in a group. There's 4 wolves, 4 of each other race, and they each have a different element. So they try to make it a well-rounded group. The purpose of this is that in any situation, they as a group can turn the tide. They have all of the elements at their command, all this stuff. If you watched the last video where we talked about magic part 2, I explain how all the magic works. So please check out that video here and talk about where that all comes from and all that stuff. So I'm not going to get into all that here. So how does this play in with our characters from the book? I see the eventual formation of these come from our 3 main characters. So Gaian is the beginnings of the Knights of Whiteforge, and Agorath is the beginnings of the Magi, and Ro is the beginning of the Hunters. So in this first trilogy of Wolves and Wizards, where we're kind of, it's the beginning of time, we're coming together, all that kind of stuff, you see these three characters working together. They've already kind of become those things. Of course, Ro is much more less formed, but by the end of this trilogy, they will be a shadow of those eventual groups. So probably Gaian and Agorath are never going to be able to reconcile. They see things too differently. Gaian will, as a character, become very weary of magic and want nothing to do with it, which is where he goes off and eventually forms this Brotherhood of Knights. Agorath is probably going to stay a good guy, but eventually, like through the next few books, that group that he starts of training Magi and whatever that becomes, I'm not really sure how that happens, he will, become the thing that eventually goes bad and gets corrupted by their power. And then Ro, finally, my story for her will be that she ends up being the first of the Hunters. So she develops this bond with a wolf. They discover the power that they can have together. I've been playing around with, so the first one is called Of Wolves and Wizards, and that's the origin of how this all comes together and how they talk and all that stuff. The next part is the next trilogy I've called On Wings of Wolves. And my idea is kind of that in the first trilogy, there are no wolves with wings. There's no wolf riders. There's none of that stuff. As our story goes on through magical means, some of the wolves actually do produce wings and become something more majestic and more powerful. And they grow in their power and they turn into these new creatures, which is going to probably, again, if you watched our magic video, come from if the wolves were created by the Evertree, then the Evertree is going to bestow on them some more power so they can defeat the enemy, something along those lines. So then the next trilogy, so like this is the beginnings of that. The next trilogy is going to be the formation of all of that. So Ro in the next trilogy will be starting this group of hunters, and it's called On Wings of Wolves because it's the beginning of the wolves and the hunters and how that all forms, and beginning of this whole civilization and the rise of it. So that's where I'm going with our three main characters. Obviously, there's a lot of interpersonal stuff to go through and all that, but that's kind of the broad strokes of like, this is where I want to take them to. And then ultimately it's going to be the story of like the control of the Evertree and then how these three groups interact in the world and their different viewpoints, and then gets us to the end goal. So we're going to go through things like where magic is really alive and vibrant, to where magic is dead, to where the hunters are a big deal, to where they're not. And like, it's just this revolving door of everyone trying to get their point across and win the story, essentially. So that's where we're at with the story. We're having a really fun time writing it. I hope that you enjoy reading it. Please check it out on Wattpad. Like, comment, subscribe. I think voting on Wattpad is what you do there. So if you like the story, please share it, give it a vote. Follow us on Wattpad. We'd really love to just blow this thing up, and we're really excited about it. We post every day that we write, as we write it. If you like what you see on the channel, we've started doing more tips and tricks videos and how to use different software programs, so please check those out. And like, comment, share, subscribe the videos if you like them. My name is Brendan Pugh. This has been Writing Quest. Huzzah!